Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa says the fourth South African Investment Conference, which ended in Johannesburg last night, has been an outstanding success. The one-day meeting was attended by 1,000 delegates, including cabinet ministers, as well as local and foreign investors. After setting a target of 1.2 trillion rand at the inaugural conference in 2018, President Ramaphosa said they have now managed to raise 95% of the target they set 4 years ago. Now let's discuss this. We're now joined via Zoom by Israel Mkhize, Bukindaba Investment Holdings Group Chief Executive. Well, a very good afternoon to you, Israel. Thanks so very much for joining us here on SABC News, sir.
Afternoon, Flo, and your listeners. How are you doing?
Great, thank you. Well, let's start with the fact that the 80 investment pledges were made at yesterday's conference. They come to a total of 332 billion rand, a staggering amount. Are we likely to see these pledges actually being honored? I mean, if we consider the fact that, you know, the impact of COVID-19 as a start and what the impact has had on the global economy, and then of course we're looking at what's currently happening in Europe. You know, we look at Russia and the Ukraine war. Will this actually happen?
Well, I think there are common interests between the investment community and President Ramaphosa's agenda to see, capital, when it's sitting as cash retained in the portfolios of investors, is not accumulating the interest and the returns that they would like to see, such as profits and stuff. So they would like to deploy capital beyond the COVID-19 lockdown. So I'm certain that they want to deploy capital. That's why they are making these commitments. So I do believe that in their calculations, they do see certain returns, they do see certain profit. With the emerging environment where the lockdown regulations are being lessened in terms of we are in a less regulatory environment, and they see President Ramaphosa even deploying people like Mr. Nkosi to deal with the red tape so that there can be ease of doing business. So there is a common interest between the investment community to deploy capital, to maximize value of capital, and also Ramaphosa to actually stimulate the economic environment, as it were.
Yeah, and you know, let's not beat about the bush, Mr. Mkhize. You know, as soon as we hear of, you know, large amounts of money coming into the country, entering the country, a lot of alarm bells go off. A lot of people start to think about issues of corruption. I mean, how do we ensure that sort of accountability on such a large amount as South Africa is plagued by corruption? How do we ensure that, you know, every cent is accounted for?
You're quite right, this, Paul. Look, this is private sector saying these are the projects that we're going to invest in, and these are the monies we're going to plan to do X, Y, Z production, manufacturing. I was sitting through the conference the whole day yesterday, and I saw this and that company going on stage and saying that this is a project we want to do. I think there would obviously factor in questions of the patronage system within the economic environment of South Africa. And we are aware there are two very big reports on the question of corruption. This was on the commission, and on the other side, the SIU investigation on the mismanagement of funds. So I think investors would definitely factor that in. But what the state has done with the whole Patoi, special investigation of commercial crimes unit, I think that somehow stimulates some degree of confidence from the investor community to say maybe Ramaphosa really means business when he says that he is anti-corruption, is anti-patronage. But the big question is, as far as I'm concerned, what will happen to these commitments should President Ramaphosa fail to secure a second term within the ANC politics in their conference in December? Will they carry through? Will they have enough confidence with the new incumbent to say, under this new incumbent, we have confidence to carry through our investment pledges and our investment programs? That's the biggest catch. And I heard President Ramaphosa yesterday using a very politically loaded statement to say, these commitments, as I look at them in the 5-year trajectory, the moment he said that, in my mind, I was like, he is obviously linking the investment commitment in light of his desire to come back and serve or do a second term, which obviously he would use this conference as another leverage or a drumming card to say, I'm actually monitoring a bigger project, so please get me back in office.
Yeah, there's always this question about how we make it easier for investors, people to do business in South Africa, considering the country's crises. I mean, I can look at electricity, for example. But, for me, that's a problematic question, in that we also need to be asking how these investors are making things better for South Africans. We're still living in an unequal society. So with all this amazing investment that we can get, but we're still having the majority of our citizens, the majority of our people still living on the cusp of poverty. What exactly is the point? To make these investors richer and richer and to go home with those riches? I mean, we keep hearing about them creating jobs and so forth, but is that the actual reality?
This is a very good question, Phil. Yesterday I listened to the keynote address, perhaps before the president spoke, by the Anglo boss who's just retiring in 29 days. And for the first time in a long time, I had capitalism with the human face, or with the face. He kept hammering on how money should be used to change people's lives, how money should not just be about capitalism and accumulation, but should talk to the transformation of people's lives. But then my interest was, how are they going to talk to the question of the fifth industrial revolution, which is more machinery technology, or what we call capital-intensive production, vis-a-vis what we want to see, which is labor-intensive production, which would translate into the following. You get a firm or one company saying they're pledging to invest in Durban or wherever to build a plant with $1 billion, for instance, capitalization. Now, we want to see how many jobs are going to be created and how many families, how many lives are going to be impacted by that single investment. I think, therefore, it will be in President Ramaphosa's interest that part of the terms of reference to these investments and these pledges would be to say, we want a very careful balancing between the balancing of the fourth IR or the fifth IR, as well as the labor intensive, because government itself has already announced in the previous year that it wants to drive the re-stimulation of the economy more so from the infrastructure drive, because we all know that the infrastructure drive, while it has technology, but it's very much labor intensive, and it absorbs a lot of people back to work, because there was a huge bloodbath on labor, particularly on the manufacturing, even mining, and a lot of sectors during the hard lockdowns. So I want to see the balancing between the labor and the fourth IR or fifth IR, whichever we believe we're at, balancing to say, yes, we will use technology in light of this investment to maximize productivity, but there should be extraordinary absorption of labor into what is envisaged with this investment.
All right, an absolute pleasure speaking to you, Mr. Mkhize. We'll certainly hope to have further chats with you on this. Cyril Mkhize, Bukindaba Investment Holdings Group Chief Executive, talking to us there. Well, many